Okay. So now I'm going to record everything that's on screen too. And we're going to try to actually use some text. So what I did was I went to the Hebrew Doc site. I went to Adult Beginning Hebrew. And then if I do on this click here, it's one of the ways of getting to the Hebrew from day one. And then I will zoom down here because there is a text that if you took the day one, then it will help. And then it's got this cool thing here where you can see, well, let's try. I don't remember how much of each one I did. I love what this says here. Nah, this is just going to be the words one by one. That's not as exciting as I wanted. Let's just see what happens. Vowels and trope. Bible text files, vowels and trope. What in the world? Well, that's better. It's green, but it's better. So you can see it phrase by phrase. And then we'll also look at it without the vowels just for fun. Oh. So, yeah, I think you'll have fun with that. So I'm going to turn this into my follow the bouncing ball thing. And we'll see what it is that we know already from this. We've looked at it before, but let's see what we could do. So the very first word of the Torah is Bereshit. I'm going to remind you that there's trope marks on here in addition to vowels. The trope marks tell you the melody, but for our purposes, there are two other things that the trope tells us that are really helpful. One is wherever you see a trope mark, there's going to be an accented syllable. So this word is not Bereshit, it's Bereshit, because the accent's over here. And then it will tell you how to phrase things together. So you'll see that this one here, it's called the munach, it's aiming toward the next word, and it means keep going. And then this one is an up and down, and that means stop. And I've already kind of pulled it by phrases. So you'll see this is an up and down, and this one is an up and down, and this is an up and down, and this is an up and down. So I've already pulled phrase by phrase for you because that's a good bite-sized amount of stuff. So last time I showed you this, I didn't know the names of all the trope marks, and I know the names of the trope marks now. I've been studying with this one kid, and we're trying to pretend we're teaching each other the trope as if there's no other expert in the world and we have to do it by ourselves. So we're doing very well, but we're doing the Haftarah melody. So what I can tell you that this is a tipcha and that's a munach et nachta. I could sing it in the Haftarah melody, but it's not the same as a trope melody. If I kickstarted my trope, my Torah trope, I might even be able to do that, but I'll do that one day soon. I'm getting there. In every Torah scroll, you'll see that the bet is bigger. It's not because it's illuminated, just because it's bigger. We don't know why. We like to conjecture why, but we don't know. But that's why there's a giant bet. This little letter Aleph, that's telling you that it's verse 1, and that's verse 2. So you're going to find in a Chumash, which is a Pentateuch, or a Tanakh, which is all of the Hebrew scriptures, you're going to find often, but not always, that they will show you the verse number with letters instead of numbers. So this first word is Bereshit. What can you tell me about Bereshit? Anything at all that you can pull from that word?
There is the prefix.
There's a prefix. The prefix is ba, which means in or with. And so this is with whatever the rest of the word is, probably. And then the rest of the word, Reshit, do you think that this is just guessing? And I'm not sure that I can tell you that you're wrong. Do you think it's a masculine or feminine word?
Feminine.
Mm-hmm. Why?
It's eat.
All right, it ends in tav and it's eat. It sounds French even. It's just kidding.
And is the resh olive shin for head?
I like to think that it's for head, because we're talking about a thing being born. We're talking about a first instance, and at least in human forms, when something is born, the head's supposed to pop out first. So I think that this is a heady instance. I think the eat ending I like to translate as instance. So one way of saying it is the ba as a prefix can be translated as in or with, but it could also potentially be translated as at or on, Like if I say on Monday, I'd use ba. And I might say that this is something like at a heady instance at the first moment or something like that. But I do think that this word is related to Rosh for head. Bereshit. So I don't like translating this as in the beginning. I don't see a the on here at all. I do see an in, and Reshit doesn't, it does have to do with a heady instance, so it could be a beginning moment. You could have it if you want it, but it's not my favorite way of translating it.
I was gonna say, what's your usual way to translate?
So there are other things. So the word Reshit is used in other places in the scriptures. It talks about, I think the quote is, knowledge is the beginning of understanding, or wisdom. Knowledge is the beginning of wisdom, or something like that. And it uses Reshit. Reshit is another thing is Reshit. So that's the beginning, like what I really like is it's, I've also heard, I like not knowing which one. I like having all of those all the time to choose from every time I see this word. I like not picking only one. I like thinking that it could also be the stuff that the world was made out of. So with Reshit, with this this primal stuff, what if we called it primal stuff? With primal stuff, and then the next word is bara. What can you tell me about bara? I mean, whatever, 3 root letters. It's an which means it's probably a he did it verb. It's not a yay verb. It's a 2 kamatzes, but because it ends in an aleph, it has to be 2 kamatzes. So that's a 3-letter root with a pattern. So it's a he did it verb. So this says something like at the first instance, or with primal stuff, he created. Bara is created, he created. And then the next word is
Elohim.
Elohim. What can you tell me about Elohim?
It's well, it appears right now.
Yes.
That
So you don't know anything else about it. If
something may have created that, so we may need more information.
Well, maybe, yeah. In the beginning, he created something. That could be that. What can you tell me about the word itself?
It's
like we said that we think that one might be feminine.
It's plural. It's plural.
It looks plural, doesn't it? It has an emin. It looks plural.
It appears masculine.
It seems masculine or mixed and plural, but I'm going to suggest that it can't be plural, even though it looks plural, as weird as that sounds, because the verb isn't going to lie. The nouns can be weird, but the verb isn't going to lie. And the verb is a he did it. So the verb can come before the subject. It's possible that this isn't the subject. We'll find that out soon once we get to the end of the sentence.
We might find out with the next word.
But well, not the next, but the next, and then the next to the next. But if it is the subject, if Elohim is the subject, then even though it looks plural, it is a singular thing. And you know what Elohim means. Most of you know what
of course.
It means God. I mean, partially, you know it just because, you know, in the beginning, God created is the way it goes. But it's not what it says. If all we have are the first 3 words, we have, in the beginning, he created God. And as Lang put it, it looks like something created something. And it looks like he created God, and we don't know who he was that created God. But whoever it is, I want to shake his hand. In the very first sentence, we learn that, first of all, it doesn't, the Torah doesn't start with in. It doesn't make sense to start with in, but it starts with ba. And why does it start with the letter bet? Why does God create the world starting with the letter bet? And that's a question that I hope you write many, many stories trying to answer. And that we already have a thing where we know that the verb and the subject don't always have to go in the order that we think them in English. It doesn't have to be subject and then verb. But because it could go either way, it's pretty cool that it's going in this direction, that we don't get to God. This is the creation story. This is the scriptures. This is our introduction to the world, the universe, everything that was ever created, and God doesn't come in until the 3rd word. That makes me go, a lot. that God's doesn't come in until the third word. And I give this to my Christian friends. This is usually the way I teach this. And you hear me say that God looks plural is the third word, looks plural, but acts singular. And every time I do that, everybody's going, ooh, I know what my sermon is going to be this week. But that's the gift for Christians. The gift for the Jews come about a sentence later. So, the other thing that I want to point out, if all we have are these three words, in the beginning, he created God, which means God created. We're not pretending that something created God. You could pretend if you want, but it wouldn't necessarily work. Actually, it could work. And by the way, Elohim can also be the word for little g gods. It could be in the beginning, he created little g gods. There are little gods everywhere. Isn't there a book by that name? Little gods everywhere, something like that.
Yeah,
Anyway,
we can only have one.
Yeah, but we don't know that now. All we know are these three words right now.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just saying it could be. I mean, if we don't know what's going on, it could be. I'm telling you that the verb can come before the subject. But if you didn't know that, you might have said he created, well, this doesn't make sense. He created God. Nothing created God. So maybe this is the little g gods version. I don't know. We'll find out soon enough. But what I'm hoping is, even in the first three words, even in the first word, but certainly in the first three words, it gives you enough to say, wow, it's going to take some digging. It's going to take working at these words, which is why the blessing for studying Torah is working at the words of Torah. But I want to show you something else that I think is really cool. We have established with what I'm going to say without a shadow of a doubt. I've been watching a lot of Columbo with Max. They never use that expression, but pretty compelling. When he nails the guy, he nails the guy.
I love Columbo so much, so much.
You have no idea. This is so much fun. And when you watch Columbo and you watch, like, we just watched Martin Sheen when he was like 20. I don't know how old he was, but he was so young. Johnny Cash, Dick Van Dyke. That's who. Anyway,
Nimoy is amazing in his episode.
last night Dick Van Dyke was the murderer.
Oh.
It was terrible. I shouldn't tell you that.
Oh, well, let me tell you. Leonard Nimoy is brilliant in his role.
I didn't get to that one yet. All right, we'll do this. All right, so what I wanted to show you is this. We believe without a shadow of a doubt that the b is a prefix, and it means something like in or with and on and at and whatever, depending on what. And that reshit, whatever that is, which probably has something to do with Rosh in it, is the noun that it's prefixing. But I want to show you something really cool. I don't know if you remember this. This verb that has to do with creation, because this is a creation story. It's made up of these three letters, Bet Resh Aleph, and the first three letters of the Torah are Bet Resh Aleph, even though they can't mean create, but there they are. How cool is that?
Wow.
I love this. And so I'm going to tell you something else about that, because you're going to see it in a moment. This is a baby. There's a world here that's a baby world. Even the sounds and the words that are being used are the kinds of words that you might be inclined to use if you were talking to a human baby from anywhere in the world. And human babies really love to have and thrive on repetition. So if you say, who loves you, baby? Who loves you, baby? I mean, that's going to help. Not the mama, not the mama. But what we have here is a repetition in the first two words of Bet Resh Aleph, of this creation happening. Bet Resh Aleph. I want you to notice that there's an aleph in every single one of these words. There's an aleph in there. This one happens to be a vowel letter. It's not even a consonant, but there's an aleph in here. There's something kind of cool about that, about this nothingness that's a somethingness. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of cool things that you can find just by looking at them, listening to the sounds, Bereshit bara. You feel like it's something's happening, like that big bang moment. Bereshit bara, Elohim. And then we have, so we got those three words. Then we have this word. So what is it so God created, what did God create? And the answer is this very next word, which is et.
Da-da-da.
Yep, thank you.
DDOM.
DDOM. So if you didn't know it was DDOM, one of the other cool things that it is Aleph and Tav. In the beginning, God created Aleph and Tav, which means the beginning and the end. Aleph is the first letter, Tav is the last letter. So you've got God created everything. There's something that we use a lot in Torah, but especially in this creation story, is something called a merism, M-E-R-I-S-M. A merism is when you mention two sides of a something, opposite ends of something, and you mean everything in between. So what is it that God created? If God created the beginning and the end of the alphabet, it means that God created everything, all of the alphabet, the whole thing. And God is we're going to see God using words to be able to create. And these are the letters that God needs to create, the aleph and the tav. And if I change this vowel from an eh to an o, then that's how you spell the word for letter. In the beginning, God created letter. In the beginning, God created all the letters, all in this word that doesn't mean anything in English. So in the beginning, God created et, and we now know that it's the DDOM, it's the definite direct object marker, which means that chances are that Elohim is not what was being created anymore. We kind of know that. Although if we didn't know that Elohim was a name, then I wouldn't need an et here anyway. So in the beginning, God created, and I need the et because of the ha. Et ha-shamayim, ve'et ha'aretz. So God created. What did God create? Dun, da, da, da. This is what's receiving the action of the verb. The heavens, which I like to call the skies, right? And the
earth.
land, the earth. So that's another merism. The skies, the heavens, and the ground, the earth. The eretz is the kind of ground that you can take in your, I mean, it's land like this, it could be land like this. But those things, and we're getting, you see how we have Elohim and then Shamayim, we've got the im kind of a alliteration again. We have a repetition of et here twice. We have Shamayim and Haaretz, which means we've got some sibilant sounds going on here. We have Breshit, Shamayim, Aretz. Those are all sibilant sounds. So there's a lot of repetition of sounds here. But I love this. So in the beginning, let's say, or with primal stuff, God created et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. And I like the word shamayim because it looks like it means sham, there, mayim is water. Where does the water come from?
That's good.
Shamayim. Haaretz. We also have the word haaretz, by the way, is a kind of a cool thing because when it comes at the end of a word, at the end of a phrase, it's going to be aretz, but the word is really eretz. So there's something, I think, powerful about the fact that where you are in this process may change what it sounds like. So it actually turns out that it's not just because it's the end of a sentence. If you add ha to eretz, it's always going to be ha aretz, and the accent's going to shift. The accent's going to be on the ah. It's going to be that where any you go, but the ah is going to change. It's one of the few words that does that. That always changes to it's a segolate eretz that always changes to the kamat segol when you add a ha to it. But I want to talk to you then about repetition. So the very next word is the same as this word, created haaretz. V'haaretz, that's repetition right there. And the land, hayta tohu vavohu. If you say that, even from v'haaretz, you've got, then you say hayta tohu vavohu. It takes all of your breath. With every one of those words, you expel all of your breath when you say hayta tohu vavohu. You have to let all your air out to say those things. Hayata tohu vavohu. So what can you tell me about any of these words? Hayata is the only word that I think you know. You know what hayata was?
Don't remember.
So the verb is haya. And I just gave you a big hint and I didn't mean to.
Oh yeah.
It means was.
And then
It means she was, it in a feminine. Hayata is she was.
right.
Why are we saying she was? What's the she? I never thought of this before. Look at what we have here. We've got a verb.
Land.
The land is feminine. Why is the land feminine? We don't know, but it is. We have a masculine singular verb that is hard to tell that it's the verb for this word because this word looks plural. We have a feminine singular noun that's hard to tell what the subject is because that doesn't look feminine. This is kind of cool that the things that we're looking at here are still very nebulous things. We can't tell. if they're masculine or feminine. It may not matter if they're masculine or feminine at this very moment in time, but we're using it. And the hayata, tohu vavohu, lots of alliteration, and it really does use up all of your breath to say these things. Hayata, she was. I can't say that unless you're Italian. And the land that she was. Tohu vavohu. And tohu vavohu means, you know what it means. It's not words that pop up a lot in modern conversation or in biblical conversation even, but you know that it means void and unformed, right? The land was void and unformed. You didn't know that? And that's where we are. If you're not good at sentence 2 of Torah, and the land was void and unformed. I mean, we've memorized this in English, so it's kind of just because we may not get much further than that when we're reading, but at least the first few sentences we should be able to do. Tohu vavohu. So one of the things I want to point out here, we have a v, which means and. We have a v, which means and. And by the way, if you're an English teacher, then don't get mad at God for starting a sentence with an and. God does it all the time. So va is and, but this one is va. Do you remember what va is? It's not because it comes before a bet. I can have a v that turns into an oo before a bet, but that's not what this one is. This is a va. Do you remember?
Is that part of the between or among?
No, but that's a good guess. This is, and we talk about it, but until you're really seeing it, it's kind of harder to grasp. That's why I wanted to do real text today and not just, the workbook stuff. It's commonly paired words. It's kind of like when in English we say bread and butter, where we just have an N with a bunch of apostrophes on it. It's only got one, but it should have a bunch. But when you just do and that's supposed to mean and, salt and pepper and man and woman and anything that's commonly paired, you just say it so often that it's hard to say tohu, uvohu or whatever, v or u. And so when you have commonly paired words, it turns into va, it flows better. So in English, it kind of gets shorter. It turns into just the n, but in Hebrew, it turns into a va and lets it flow easier. Tohu vavohu. And then we have, and the land she was, tohu vavohu, she was void and unformed. And then we have v'choshech. Here's another v. Lots of repetition, remember, v'choshech. And I love this word because it sounds like what it is, choshech. It sounds like velvet. It sounds like somebody snoring. It sounds kind of gentle, but a little bit scary. It sounds a little bit like like they're about to pounce on you. And that's what choshech is. It's darkness. And darkness, the choshech.
My dog is snoring about 10 feet from me, and he's making that exact sound.
That's what I'm saying. Let sleeping dogs lie, because otherwise they're dangerous. So choshech is darkness, and it seems like velvet. It sounds like velvety. It sounds like gentle snoring, but it also sounds a little bit intimidating, because that's what darkness is. A little bit intimidating. And then we have al panei tahom. So do you know al?
Above?
On or upon or above? I'm muting you, Lang. It says Richard on there. It almost scared me there. I don't know who you
I
are.
was gonna say, I didn't know who that guy
The
was.
Richard guy. It was weird. I was gonna scold Richard, but I decided not to. But I had to mute you. It sounded like potato chips, and I haven't had lunch yet, so I'm just gonna say. Well, I don't think it was potato chips, but distracting. Al is on or upon or above. Panei.
Your face or your
Right.
soul?
It's
or
the face of, so it's al panei is the face of, al panei. So it's, and darkness is on the face of, you see the A ending, that means it was panim, but it's face of, the something of. Al panei, and then the last word I love is taho. I love that word, taho. And it means the deep, on the face of the deep. Can't you tell by how deep I went? I tried to go really deep. Tahom. You hear it going on the face of the deep. V'choshech al panei tahom. And there's darkness on the face of the deep, which gets to me. You've heard me do this spiel. Some of you have heard me do this spiel many times. That if you have, I always imagine this as a hole, okay? So if you have a hole, there's darkness on it. It looks like a dark hole, right? But I think it's not just the face of it. I think it gets darker the deeper it goes. So it's strange that it says there's darkness on the face of the hole, and that it's not, and that it's a hole that's going down. I don't know that it's going down. And the land was void and unformed, and there was darkness on the face of the deep. And I always imagine water, hole, something like that. But I think that it might not be that deep. I think the deep might be out there. I think that if you have a dark night and there's only darkness, it is true, it's going to keep getting darker and darker, but it makes a little bit more sense for me to hear the darkness on the face of that. Plus choshech sounds like sky. I know, sounds like it's out there. But whatever it is, I mean, we're trying to get a picture in our head of what we're talking about here. And I want to point out that I don't think you could. I don't think you should, but I don't think you could. I don't think that you could really know what this looked like because we weren't there. And the description we're getting is really good. We're using good words for it, but I don't think that we could really know. So we can use our imaginations about what it could mean, but I'm kind of glad that I don't know, that every time I hear it, I think about it, and I try to scrutinize these words, and I try to think about, and by the way, I'm going to keep going there. Hayata, tohu vavohu, and tahom, those are all related words. There's lots of, you're letting out all your breath to say them. All right, so there's darkness on the face of that deep, whatever the deep is. And then it says, Viruach Elohim. Well, that's definitely repetition. We saw that word in the first sentence, and now it's back in the second sentence. And we see another thing starting with an and. Viruach. And by the way, so that's a furtive patach, which means if you see a chet at the end of the word, you have to pronounce the ah first, the patach first. Viruach Elohim. So ruach Elohim, two nouns squished together, which means we have a possessive thing going on right here. So this is the something of God.
It's the breath of God.
Breath or the wind or the spirit. Exactly. Breath or wind or spirit. Ruach Elohim. Think of that. Breath or wind or spirit of God. Mirachefet. And that's the chapter I didn't let you get to today. I'm just kidding. It's not just that. This is also a PL. It's not a pa'al. So you wouldn't have gotten to this specific word, but we would have gotten to the concept of the participle form. Participle form, we've already learned that there's perfect tense, which means it's past and it's completed action. There's imperfect, which we like to think of it as future, but it's an incomplete action. But the participle form is the ing form. It's a continuous action. It always was and always will be. So this word, the mirachefet, which feels a little bit like what it is, it's something to do with God's breath or wind or spirit. And we usually translate it as is hovering. Hovering. Al Panay, that's the same thing we just saw here on the face of Hamayim. We saw Shamayim and now we're seeing Mayim. Mayim is the water. So we've got darkness on the face of the deep, but we've got the spirit of God, the breath of God, the wind of God hovering on the face of the water. I'm going to tell you that this is not unlike Big Bang Theory. It's connected to that. People find it in here. But the wind or breath or spirit of God is hovering on the face of the waters. I don't know what it is. Is it breath, wind? But here's another really cool thing. Remember what I just said? I usually don't make that connection. Today, this I always make. So ruach is a strange word because it can be masculine or feminine grammatically. Which one is it in this sentence? Is it masculine or feminine? Take a guess, even if you don't know anything about participles. This is my
Feminine.
verb. It's feminine. So ruach, wind, spirit, breath, can be masculine, it can be feminine. God's telling us the story of what happened, and God chose to say that it is feminine. I don't know why, but it is.
Mhm.
So in sentence one, we see something that's plural but acts like a singular. We see something that's feminine, looks masculine, acts, but it's feminine. We see something that can go masculine or feminine, and it's going feminine. I can tell you that what I get out of these things is that the reason why this is a plural word that acts singular is there is only one God, and that God has many aspects, attributes. God is a multiplicity of being. And so God is creating here, but God's breath is hovering here. You will find fairly consistently that when it talks about a spiritual thing, when God is being represented as spiritual, that it's often feminine. And I don't, in Hebrew scriptures, I don't mean that as any connection whatsoever to do with a Christian concept of God and spirit. That was not to make any connection there at all. But in this case, the Spirit of God is feminine. And so we have a creator God, the God that interacts with the world and does, and it's done, is a masculine aspect of God. And the God that is always was and always will be is this kind of spiritual aspect, and it's feminine. So I like that. So Veruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim, and the wind or the spirit or the breath of God is hovering on the face of the waters. Vayomer Elohim. Here we have Elohim again, third sentence, third time we've seen Elohim already. And here's spoiler alert. It's right there, all over the place.
It's going down.
Spoiler alert, we got lots of God all over the place here. Vayomer Adonai. So this is a Va. It looks a lot like this Va. No, it doesn't, thank goodness, because it means something totally different. This Va, with this root word, Aleph Mem Resh, if you see a Va, not a Va, if you see a Va with a dagesh in it, and this is the future tense marker, the imperfect marker, then you know that what's happening here is, drum roll please, we have a reversing Vav right here. So this looks like, this word looks like, it's the third sentence. So far we've seen three verbs. No, we've seen four verbs. This verb, first sentence, this verb is perfect, past tense. This verb is perfect, past tense. This verb is continuing action. This verb looks like it's future, but you have to understand it as past. It's a completed action. Vayomer Elohim means, and God said.
Said.
The yud is the marker for he will, but that va plus the yud, the marker for the future tense, where the accent's over here, Vayomer Elohim, and he said. What did God say? Suspense is killing me. And God said, God didn't say, maybe God said, let there be light, and everything rumbled and boom, that stuff happened. But this feels like breathing. I mean, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that there was breath, there was wind. And God said, see, he or to me says, be light. Light will be. Ye, it will be light. Ye or be light. Or.
Oh, you do say the Yahi.
Yeah, ye or.
Yahi.
Yeah.
So this is from the same root as the Haya, the Hayata, that's the B.
Mhm.
This is or. And remember, the resh is not a r, it's not a r, it's back here. Oh. So it's kind of, all of this is really breathy. It's still very breathy. And guess what happened? And God said, be light, and light was. And here's another reversing Vav. It looks like future tense, but it's past tense. Vayhi or, and light was. It's got a Va, it's got a future tense marker, and it's Vayhi or. And you're going to say, why wasn't there a dagesh in there? Because I told you that was one of the markers here, because you're adding a Va to the beginning and you're not going to have anything. But a yud, when it has a shva under it at the beginning of a word, for many things, doesn't take a dagesh. So you'll expect to see that sometimes. Yud with a shva under it. So notice that this doesn't have a shva under it, it's got an O. This one doesn't have a shva under it. This one doesn't have a shva under it. This one doesn't have a shva under it. We've seen a lot of reversing vavs here. We're seeing a lot of what looks like future, but we're supposed to understand it as past. So we're at sentence dalet, which is 4. Vayar. So Vayar has the root is resh aleph hey. The hey drops out. it looks like it comes from Resh Aleph Hey, the verb is to see. It reminds us of Aleph Resh, which is light. It's using the same exact letters, but reversed. Vayar Elohim, and God saw. We're supposed to understand it as past tense. Et haor, what did God see? Et
The light
haor, God saw the light. Ki tov, so what's ki and what's tov?
was good.
Yeah, because it's good. And because, or that, or whatever, I mean, we translate often that it's good. I like to think that, until there was any light, it was really hard to see. You saw light, and that's good. That's because it's good. It's good to have light. That's good. So you couldn't see before you had light. I'm just saying, Vayar Elohim. What did God see? Anything. Et haor, God saw light. Ki tov, because it's good. So, but what happens with ki tov, and we're not intending to get past day one today, but if you look at the other days, there's significance in the fact that most days it says ki tov. One day it doesn't, and one day it says it twice. And so the rabbis take from that there are auspicious days to get married. The one that says twice, I think it's Thursday, it says it twice. I mean, fifth day says it twice. And they're inauspicious days to get married because it's not a ki tov day. So it's be hump day. I don't remember. I got to look back. My brain's a little bit. I've been at work all day today, and my brain is still. I haven't had lunch. You know that. My brain's a little mushy. I can't remember which day it was, but we've got a ki tov here, and it's a really good thing. It's ki tov. It's good. And by the way, so some of these phrases are phrases that you can use in lots of situations. So you can talk about a bereshit moment, and a creation in the beginning moment. You can say, every time you flip on a switch, you could say Yehior, Vayhior, or one or the other, pick one and use it. And you can say Ki Tov. I do it with the kids. I'll show you the song that we do. And they have to do Ki Tov, that it's good. And then we get, all right, keep going. Vayavdel Elohim. There's a ceremony that we do at the end of Shabbat and at the end of holy days, so that we're separating the holiness of that day from the regularness of the rest of the week. We learned about it last night. I'm sorry, most of you didn't get to see that last night. And the ceremony is called
Havdalah.
Havdalah or Havdalah. She's showing her Ashkenazic. Her Ashkenazic is showing Havdalah, which is Havdalah in modern Hebrew, exactly the same thing. And this is the root for that. It means the separation, Havdalah. And this is Bet Dalet Lamed. It says vet, but it's the same thing. And that means to separate or to distinguish. And this is a reversing Vav situation. And this is he did it. So it's Vayavdel Elohim, and God separated, and God distinguished, made a distinction. And then we get to what Lisa was talking about before, one of our favorite things to think about, because we remember these things. Bain, we have a bain, uvein, right? So we distinguish between and between. So that was one of the things that we look for. Bain something, uvein something, between and between. We know this word because we just saw it here. A lot of repetition. Bain haor, what was it that God distinguished between, separated?
Light.
Bain haor, between the light.
Light.
Uvein hachoshech, we've seen that word too.
And the
Darkness. So it brings me to a very strange question that I ponder about a lot. I sometimes have glimmers of how it worked, but I sometimes don't. I'm in a very, very, very dark place. It's all darkness, just dark, right? Pitch black. Darkness on the face of it, darkness on the bottom of it, darkness everywhere. I turn on a light. It doesn't matter how little it is or how big it is. There's no darkness where the light was. I don't have to separate out the darkness from the light. There's light in some places and there's darkness in some places. And I don't have to make a distinction between darkness and light. Sometimes I think about that. God made a distinction between the light and the darkness. So I'll tell you, one of my first theories was, you know how if you make chocolate milk and you have chocolate syrup, I'm going to say you bet, but you probably don't have you bet. Maybe you had Hershey's or something. I don't know what you had, but I had you bet, which is what we often had, especially at Passover. They have it probably on clearance right now at a supermarket near you. You bet chocolate syrup. It's what you make egg creams out of. And there's no egg or cream in an egg cream, but I'm just saying. All right. So Chuck, you take a syrup and you squirt it out and you see, how cool is it that you see like a swirly thing that reminds you of the Milky Way or something? And then you stir it and then it goes from like black and white, swirly, and then you stir it and it turns into brown. What would happen if you did that backwards? That's what I think of, isn't this separating between the dark and the light? That's what I think happens. But obviously, that's not the only way to look at it, because what happens in the next sentence is one of the ways that God distinguishes between them. And it gives me goosebumps to think about this, because one of the ways that God distinguishes between things is he gives them names. And I'm going to keep saying he for God, and I'm sorry about that. But they're masculine singular verbs here, so I'm stuck. Vayikra, so it's a reversing vav. We have a va and a yud with another thing that's not a shva and a dagesh in that yud. Vayikra, and God, and he called, and God called. So kara means to call. It means to read. I don't think we're reading now, but maybe you could go to read. Vayikra, and God called laor, to the light, yom. God called to the light yom. So you imagine what it took for God to give something a name. It's not the same as a cat. I can promise you that when God calls to the light day, now it's called day. He calls to it day, and now that's it. He's stuck with that. If I call Galileo, Galileo will never come. If I call Galileo, it's not so stuck. But the idiom for giving something a name is kara la, calling to. And I just love that, because God can call to something, and that's what the name is. And I point that out because we're going to see it again here. But I think, and this is something I have not seen anybody else comment on, and I'm not saying it so that I could be unique here, but if we go to the second creation story and we look at how the first woman got her name, I don't think we hear it as if the first man gave the first woman a name, but I'm not convinced that that's what happened. I think that God gave that woman a name. If you look at it, it doesn't say the kara la, it just says kara. He called Eve. He didn't call her Eve, he just called Eve. But anyway, but it's kind of a little bit irrelevant. It's a long time ago and it doesn't necessarily matter, except I like thinking that God had a role in this and not just the guy. Vayikra Elohim laor yom. And I want you to say the word yom. Yom. I want you to feel it on your mouth. I want you to feel it in your mouth. Yom, yom. So for one thing, if you put your lips together like that, it's going to buzz and it's going to tickle.
Vibrate. Yeah.
All right, yom. And then we're going to get to the end of this phrase, v'lachoshech, and to the darkness, to the darkness. You see that the kara, he called. So this time it was he called, but you're seeing a future tense. This time it's he called, but you're seeing a past tense. V'lachoshech kara laila. And I want you to say laila, and I want you to feel your mouth saying laila.
Lila.
So I want to point out, and I'm not the one who came up with this. There's a professor at LSUS who's a professor of linguistics who didn't understand a word of the Hebrew that I was teaching at the time. And he said, well, Yom and Lila, those are suckling sounds. We have a baby here, and the names that God gave to the things that God created on the first day are the first sounds that any human baby can make, because they're suckling. Ma, 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 la, la, la. That's what they need to be able to nurse. Ma, 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 la, la, la. It's not day. You're not going to say day, and it's certainly not night. That is not a sound that is a baby sound. Night.
That's fascinating.
Isn't that the coolest thing?
Yeah.
I'll buy it.
Yeah, is that cool? Well, and then if you look at the other days, which we never get around to because I spend so much time on day one. But if you look at the other days, the names that God gives to the things that God created become more, I'm going to call it linguistically sophisticated, in the same way that every human baby speech becomes more controlled. It's the coolest thing. I love it. I don't know, maybe humans wrote this thing. I have no idea, but there's an awful lot of wonderful stuff in each one. So v'lachoshech kara laila. And then we say, and there's also alliteration here. We got a lot of la-la-las in this. And then it says, vayhi erev. So it's another reversing vowel. It has to do with haya, which was, and it was erev.
Yeah.
Erev is evening.
Evening
Vaihi voker. Boker is morning, and I say
was
Voker is
morning.
morning, but it says Voker because it's coming. You notice how they're hyphenated here. So there's it's hyphenated. It's being treated as if it were part of the same word. After a long vowel, you would not have a dagesh. So it's Vaihi Voker, it says, and there was morning, and it was evening and it was morning. Yom Echad. What's Echad mean? What does Echad mean? One. It doesn't mean first, it means one. Can one mean first? If there's a two, yeah, I guess so. Just one, it just means one. It doesn't mean anything else. So I love the fact that it doesn't. If you open up your Bible, I guarantee you that probably 9 times out of 10, it will say first day. It will not say one day. It will not say day one or one day. And I'm going to propose that says day one, or it says one day. And it makes you wonder, why would it say that? Why would everybody translate first day if it says one day? And the answer that I thought about was, Lang is dying to say it. Go, Lang, you say it.
Oh,
You're not dying to say it. So if you have one child, right? And he's 17 years old, do you introduce your one child as your first child? If you only have one, it's really rude when you introduce your wife as your first wife. I'm just saying, it's really rude, unless there's a second. I can introduce him as my first child if there's a second, but if all I have is one, then there's only one day. And that's cool enough right there. So one of the things we learned, obviously, is first comes Erev, then comes Boker. First there's evening, then comes morning, and that's what constitutes one day. And so why does the Jewish calendar begin their days in the evening?
the
Sundown?
evening.
Yeah.
Because there was evening and there was morning. I'm not making this up. God said so I'm going to do it. Is it easy to think about your day starting as soon as the sun goes down? Maybe if you're Galileo. No, I'm just kidding. My cat's name, Lisa, I don't know if you heard that part. My cat's name is Galileo.
I figured that.
Yeah, thank you. So, because if I call him, he won't come. But if you're, and he's actually better than that, but 5 o'clock in the morning, then he thinks it's another day. But
I'm sure the real Galileo would consider the beginning of his day to be in the evening too, because that's when
I
he
think
started
so.
looking
That's
at the
when
stars.
Exactly. He'd sleep all day and glance at stars all night, work on his computer all day. So Vaihi Erev, Vaihi Voker, Yom Echad. There was evening, there was morning, day one day. And there's a lot of that you already knew. A lot. So if it's vocabulary that you weren't sure of, it's easy to look up vocabulary words. If it was a grammatical thing, if it was something you didn't totally get, can you figure out what the verb is? Came up a lot. The verb to be came up a bunch of times. But do you feel, so I'm going to remind you when we talk about breath and wind, the story of how God, a second creation story, about how God creates a human by taking earth from the four corners, clay from the four corners of the earth, shaping it into a human form, and then taking God's nose and exhaling, using that breath, that wind, that spirit, exhaling it into this clump, and that's what gives it life. And all throughout this story, we were hearing God exhaling, all throughout the story. Just this first day alone, we're hearing God exhaling, tohu, vavohu, and Yihye and Tihye and Haita, and all of these words are or, even Vaihi or, that when God starts speaking these words into being, we're feeling God exhaling. It may be a feminine breath, that's okay. God is doing the exhaling and we're feeling a feminine breath, and that's a wholeness to existence itself.
In the Catholic Church, we have a chrism mass every year where the bishop blesses the holy oils, 3 different oils, and as a part of it, he breathes onto each vessel of oils. It's bringing down the Holy Spirit. So there's the breath is big for us as well.
Except this year he had to wear 3 masks when he did. I'm sorry. I know that wasn't. It was just complicated. I know that it was complicated. Isn't there something when they changed the wording in the thing? Well, they say, peace be with you and also to your spirit. But wasn't there something, the breath, what's the song that's hitting in my head about the breath and the something?
Breath of life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And that's
a long.
power.
I am the breath of life. Who believes in me shall not wander. Yeah.
And it feels like breath when you say it.
Yeah.
I am the breath. And you say it over and over and over again, like breathing. I know. That's a powerful one that gets to me. But anyway, here it is. The breath of life is all happening here, and light and words, and how important the words are, and that saying brings things into being. We still know that our words are important. All right, so then I was going to show you, hold on, this one. That's the first day in my favorite Torah that we have. So why is it my favorite Torah? Because it has these gorgeous trees on top. The little hooks on top of a word are called tagim. And the story that I was told, which there's a Sofer guy I know, and he tells a different story, and I don't even remember what his story was. But the tagim, I was told, so God created the world using letters and words, and these letters are wanting to go back to Hashemayim, and so we have to hook them onto the page, the parchment, so they don't go flying back. Now, not all letters are allowed to have tagim, but I want to show you how magnificent the tagim are in this Torah. So normally they're going to look a little bit like this, like eyelashes or something. I don't know. Sometimes they have just one cute thing like this. Sometimes they have 3. In an Ashkenazic Torah, most of the time, if it has it, it's going to be 3. But in certain Sephardic Torahs, some have 1, some have 2, some have 3s. You do see something that looks a little bit like a 1 on these. I think that's a stylistic thing, but I want to show you, if it's at the very top line where there's a lot of space, he does these things that are like trees. But when it's in between, when there's space, he does this thing that's, I don't know what that is. It's beautiful. And then when it doesn't have a lot of space, so this is not the handwriting of most scribes. I love this one. It's got all these cool mystical things in it. We're in the process of trying to commission a Torah, and I wanted to know if I could have a Torah like this, and he said no. So, some of these letter things are illegal. They're not allowed to do it anymore. I'm glad I have them, but all right. So you'll notice that the bed is bigger. So we have Bereshit, bara. Remember, he created Elohim. Et hashamayim. What did he create? The skies. Ve'et haaretz, and the land. The final tzadi going down. Ve'haaretz hayeta tohu. And you notice how he had to make these letters wider. So when you get to the end of the row, if it's supposed to be flesh right and flesh right and flesh left, if it's getting too close to the end and you're not going to make it, you're not going to be able to push another word. So certain letters are allowed to be wider. So I sat with a sofer who was fixing our Torah scrolls, and he explained that a really good sofer never needs to do this. Because he knows exactly how many letters he needs, and he knows exactly the width of each letter, and he knows exactly how much space each word should take, and he should never get to the end and have space left over, so he has to fill in the gaps.
Wow.
But I think it looks kind of cool, so that doesn't make me sad about that one.
He only said that because he was jealous of the trees up by
this guy loved this Torah. He wrote pages and pages and pages of explanation about the Torah. So it says Bereshit bara haaretz, and then the second sentence is v'haaretz hayata, and the land was tohu vavohu. Poor tohu is gorgeous and vohu is kind of squished. V'choshech, and I want to show you that choshech, the chet is 2 Zions with a little hat on top. That's all the way they are in Torah scroll. V'choshech al panei tahom, on the face of the deep. V'ruach Elohim merachefet al panei hamayim, and the Spirit of God, Ruach Elohim, the wind, the breath, is hovering on the face of the waters. Vayomer Elohim, and God said, Yor, be light. Vahior, and God, and light was. Vayar Elohim et haor, and God saw the light. Ki tov.
That was good.
Vayavdel Elohim ben haor uven hachoshech, and God separated, distinguished, made clear what was the difference between ben haor, between the light, uven hachoshech, and between the darkness. Vayikra Elohim laor yom, and he called, and God called to the light day, yom. V'lachoshech, and to the darkness, kara laila. God called light.
It was a long night.
It was. Look at how long as the darkness got to us. There are a lot of really good midrashim, which are stories about how the first humans were kind of nervous about when darkness came in that first day cycle, because the humans were created long after all this happened. So next thing you know, there's a cycle. I mean, after this, we still didn't have a sun and a moon or anything like that. We had no light-giving forces. We just had light and darkness. And then eventually we had light and darkness. We had light-giving things. So we had light times and we had dark times. And the human was created during a daytime. And next thing you know, it's getting darker and darker. And he's convinced that it's the end of all of life.
Yeah.
You know, he's scared. So fire comes into play there. Vahi erev, vahi voker, and there was evening and there was morning. Yom echad, one day, day one. Isn't that cool?
That's beautiful.
I just love it.
That's a weird hit too.
Well, the chet is almost always going to be like that. Sometimes it'll be.
It has a point like
Yeah,
that.
in the Torah, it will always have a point like that.
Wow.
And this guy, it's a thicker point. I don't think I have.
Yeah, look at the one above it in the next row up.
So this one, yeah, it's got one
Yeah.
line that's thicker and one line that's thinner. And then this one, choshech. Yeah, it's weird. It looks like, yeah, this one, some of them, it looks like there's only one line coming off of this one and that the Zion just extends out. This one has a whole hat.
But that was handwritten.
Yes, every
So maybe
Torah
it was more just because of
could be the way the parchment was, the bumps.
right.
So you'll notice, I mean, you can see pretty well on this that what they do first is they take the parchment, which is skin of an animal, and a kosher animal, and and it's been dried and prepped and everything, and then they have a board that has lines already in it. So they rub on the parchment to make score lines. It's scoring. It's called scoring lines, so that they can make all of their letters be.
Oh, you can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see it. If I zoom in,
Yeah.
you can see the lines that are there. And I saw them do that. I may have admitted this before. When you get a divorce in Jewish tradition, you're supposed to get a get. The get is the name of the Jewish divorce decree, and it's a specifically worded document that only has a certain number of words and a certain number of lines, and it has to be done in a very specific manner. And he had but it's a smaller piece of paper. It's not like a giant parchment scroll piece. And he had a board that was smaller than, it was bigger than this size pad, 5x7. It was a little bit bigger than this. And he had a board that was a lot like like a clipboard kind of a thing, the brown clipboards. And he had it scored, and then he rubbed on that one piece of parchment so that his lines would be right. I was fascinated by the way he wrote it. I mean, the idea of it being my divorce was not traumatic to me, because I was like, oh, look what he just made. And I'm watching him write letters upside down, like, that's so
Did you staple it to your ketubah?
it wouldn't have helped. No, you have to tear it.
We don't want it to get lost.
It's a whole process. I'll tell you, my ketubah. Well, we'll talk about that after. And I don't think that there was a lot that wasn't right. My name wasn't right. Ricky's name was. I mean, I don't think we were ever really married, but apparently you are anyway, even if nothing's right on there.
You need a get.
We'll talk about it. I needed a get. I got my get. It took a while, but I got my get. But I thought it was fascinating how he writes the letters on that. He didn't have this kind of a handwriting. But anyway, I wanted to share that with you.
The only one I've seen was the man that was sitting in that little room at Masada,
Oh,
and he was writing. He was doing his thing. It was
that's pretty cool.
interesting. It was interesting. Yeah.
That's really cool. I was going to see if I could find any other version of this so that you could, another Torah, so that you could just compare it. That's not a Torah. Come here. Let me tell you if you can see why. Right? Hold on. I'm going to share the screen for a second. Tell me if you can tell me why I know that
It's not a Torah.
it's not a Torah. Hold on. I got to do this. Screen 2. So can you see this one? Can you see where my yad is?
Yeah.
So how do you know that? I mean, they made it look so fancy, like a parchment. How can you tell that that's not a Torah?
Can you
It's not
Ink-
handwritten.
make it bigger?
Maybe.
Yes. Whoop. I can. Now I lost it. It's down here.
Oh.
Here it is. Can you see it? It's over on the right now.
Yeah.
How can you tell it's not really in a Torah? Forget about the fact that it says Free Messianic Bible. Ignore that.
It wouldn't have been written on that kind of paper?
It could have been. I mean, they're making it look like it's parchment.
It's got vowels.
It's got vowels.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
It's
Good
got vowels
job.
and trope. That's why.
Good job, Richard.
Yeah, exactly. He'll answer to Richard. It's not scaring you as much as him as much.
Yeah.
As,
But thank goodness for the last name.
that's right. That's right. We know who you are.
That's my what did they call it? That's my professional name.
Oh, okay.
I don't see that may be a Torah, but it's not. It's Bereshit. I asked for a Torah. I asked
Bereshit.
for Bereshit. That's the name of the book. So the first unique word. So it's images. Sometimes, no, I got to get smaller. This is still just all of them, but they're not in Torah. Oh, in Torah scroll. Let's do it that way. Now, yeah, they're still trying to pin that one off as real. None of these with the vowels in it. None of them with the vowels. Some of this one looks.
That one, yeah.
It looks like it's got some fancy stuff on it. This one has a tree on Elohim. I don't know why they're doing that.
Now that's a tree. That's a red
That's a
one.
real tree. That's right. They're serious about that tree. No, this isn't fair. That's not. Why is it? What else would you have asked for if not that? But you know that like real Hebrew in the original one would have looked more like this. Those were the letters. But I'm not seeing. That's not fair. Well, I think I have it on other things. Here's one. That bet is a good one. But anyway, all right, that was fun.
Where is your mother?
Hold on. We will